All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping straight into a really fascinating, highly structured, and honestly deeply impactful public policy proposal, a complete public space food ban. Now, regardless of where you stand on street food culture, because we're staying completely neutral here, the architecture of this proposed hygiene framework is just incredibly rigorous. We're going to completely break down the exact rationale and the strict enforcement mechanics detailed in the source material. Let's get into it.
So think about this for a second. What if the biggest public health risk in your city isn't the local hospital, and it's not the smog overhead? What if it's actually that hot dog stand you walk right past every single day? You know, historically, informal street food has been one of the absolute hardest things for any city to regulate. It often operates completely off the grid. Well, the source material we're unpacking today argues exactly that. It proposes that unseen dangers are just thriving when food is prepared in open public spaces, because there's no controlled oversight, no guaranteed hygiene, and definitely no consistent inspection. To combat this, the proposed solution is simple, but man, is it incredibly strict. A blanket ban on all public space food preparation and serving.
Okay, here's exactly how we'll break this down today. First, we'll look at the hidden health risk. Then, the core problem, the proposed shift to actually fix it, how authorities plan on enforcing the ban, and finally, the strict punishment framework. All right, starting off with part one, the hidden health risk, focusing specifically on the real cost of contaminated food.
The framework maps out this very specific chain reaction caused by unregulated food. First up, you have widespread illness across the population. Second, heavy medical expenses for families dealing with that illness. Third, a noticeably reduced quality of daily life. But here's the kicker. The ultimate issue driving this entire policy is the fourth point, the repeated, almost inevitable failure of enforcement systems that are trying to operate in open, uncontrolled environments. It just doesn't work.
And that failure of enforcement brings us perfectly to part two, the core problem, which the framework defines as uncontrolled conditions.
See, the reality of open space food preparation is really defined by what it lacks. There is absolutely no fixed hygiene verification. It's kind of like trying to inspect a moving target in the wind, right? There's no stable environment, and because of that, there is zero consistent accountability. It's literally a massive logistical blind spot for health inspectors.
Which brings us to the foundational concept of this whole proposal, the structural gap. This is a systemic flaw. When you physically cannot enforce rules consistently, public health risks stop being little accidents and they become a routine occurrence. The system essentially bakes the risk right into your daily commute. So you have to ask, how does a city actually solve a risk that has become the default routine?
Well, the answer is in part three, the proposed shift. The entire purpose of this proposal is to eliminate that structural gap entirely.
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole transition. Right now, as you can see, we have open, informal environments, which the text bluntly categorizes as uncontrolled exposure. The objective here is to force all of this activity indoors into regulated, inspectable premises to create controlled safety. The core argument is that safety isn't achieved by just hoping vendors wash their hands, It's achieved by enforceable structural design.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to be clear about the exact intent here. As the text states, the goal is not to restrict the food itself. This isn't an attack on the availability of your favorite snacks. Rather, the goal is specifically to eliminate uncontrolled food handling in public spaces. The proposal basically dictates that when regulation can't be consistently applied, the risk becomes systemic. So, food production literally must be shifted indoors to environments where safety standards can actually be locked down and enforced.
Okay, so now that we understand the why, we really need to look at the how. Let's move to part four, enforcing the ban, which relies on a very specific dual-agency execution. To actually pull this off, the proposal relies on a really strict division of inside versus outside. The food safety authorities, they handle the inside. We're talking licensing, setting hygiene standards, and ensuring indoor compliance. Meanwhile, the law and order police step up as the enforcers of the outside. They are actively preventing unauthorized prep, removing food encroachments, and even confiscating equipment. Essentially, the police keep the streets completely clear so the safety authorities can focus 100% on what's happening in the kitchens.
Of course, a structure like that needs some teeth to deter violations, which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the punishment framework, built entirely around escalating consequences.
Now, this system doesn't mess around with mere warnings. It categorizes offenses rigidly into first violations and repeat violations. And there are heavy, immediate legal consequences attached the very second a rule is broken.
Even for a first-time offense, the penalties are incredibly severe. It immediately triggers a monetary fine and a criminal case under the Public Health Act. But here is the real game changer. It institutes a geography access restriction under the Criminal Regrouping Prevention Act, or CRPA. Think about that. It means a vendor isn't just handed a fine. They are legally banished from that specific geographic area. So no, they can't just pack up and set up shop on the very next block.
And if a vendor actually attempts to violate the ban again, the system aggressively expands those punishments. We're talking higher fines, continued criminal proceedings under the Public Health Act, and that geographic restriction, it gets way broader. The framework leverages financial, criminal, and spatial boundaries all at the exact same time to make noncompliance practically impossible.
So, what does this all mean? Ultimately, every single aggressive police tactic and severe penalty in this framework serves one singular objective: to eliminate uncontrolled food activity in public spaces entirely. By forcing all that production into regulated indoor environments, the state is aiming to achieve a vast structural improvement in public health safety.
I want to leave you with this final quote directly from the source text: a shift from informal exposure to regulated safety. The framework argues that public health risk begins the exact moment we lose control of the environment where food is handled. This proposal is just a fascinating study in systemic regulation, clearly prioritizing rigid structural design over informal open space culture. But, it leaves us with a really compelling question to chew on. As our cities grow and public health becomes more and more complex, where exactly do we draw the line between the freedom of our open public spaces and the absolute necessity of structural health regulations? Think about that the next time you take a walk through your city. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.